Yo, what's going on, everybody? It's your boy Jezreel. You know what it is. Truth that sets you free, the podcast. You feel me? It's been a little minute, but I've been waiting and I've been trying to be patient on this episode. This is Mentorship Part 4. No, matter of fact, let me correct myself. Mentorship Types Part 4, the most holy place, aka the Holy of Holies. You feel me? So, look, man, check this out. So, in the last few episodes so far, we've pretty much went over the different types. This is how I relate to relationships, because you don't really have real deep mentorship without relationship. Now, you can kind of have a sense of mentorship. I talked about that before when it comes to like, okay, I read books, I follow the ministry, I support online, all of the things. But it really starts to get real and deep when you start forming relationships. You know what I mean? So the different types, the way I relate it, the way I've always related, and I've heard other people say that. I don't know if I've really heard a whole teaching on it, but I've heard the lingo before. So basically, just to go over it real quick, just to recap, the different types, starting from 3, are the outer courts, the inner courts, and the Holy of Holies. That's the most holy place. And this is based off of the tabernacle, which is the precursor to the temple. You feel me? Which, all goes back to the Garden of Eden, which also reflects the courts of heaven. And I went over that in depth, you know what I mean, in the last one. So, today, I'm going to be going over the most holy place, the Holy of Holies, and I can't touch everything. This isn't an exhaustive thing about the Holy. I don't know everything, but I'll just give you guys my thoughts and how it relates to us as human beings and how we want to be with the Lord and our relationship with Him and as it relates to others. Because really, when you look at the first commandment is, have no other God. I am the Lord thy God. Have no other gods before me, right? So, with that being said, Jesus later on, he said, love the Lord your God and love your neighbor. It's love, right? So with that being said, what is love? It's intimacy. It's an intimate relationship. You know what I mean? So this is how I'm going to convey this. This is how I'm going to go over this when it comes to the most holy place, when you start forming relationships. You know what I mean? So the different types, the way I relate it, the way I've always related, and I've heard other people say that. I don't know if I've really heard a whole teaching on it, but I've heard the lingo before. So basically, just to go over it real quick, just to recap, the different types, starting from 3, are the outer courts, the inner courts, and the Holy of Holies. That's the most holy place. And this is based off of the tabernacle, which is the precursor to the temple. You feel me? Which, all goes back to the Garden of Eden, which also reflects the courts of heaven. And I went over that in depth, you know what I mean, in the last one. So, today, I'm going to be going over the most holy place, the Holy of Holies, and I can't touch everything. This isn't an exhaustive thing about the Holy. I don't know everything, but I'll just give you guys my thoughts and how it relates to us as human beings and how we want to be with the Lord and our relationship with Him and as it relates to others. Because really, when you look at the first commandment is, have no other God. I am the Lord thy God. Have no other gods before me, right? So, with that being said, Jesus later on, he said, love the Lord your God and love your neighbor. It's love, right? So with that being said, what is love? It's intimacy. It's an intimate relationship. You know what I mean? So this is how I'm going to convey this. This is how I'm going to go over this when it comes to the most holy place. So when it comes to the most holy place or the Holy of Holies, it cannot be experienced without intimacy. And I'm going to say it again and again. It can't be experienced without intimacy. Because what do? When you picture the tabernacle, you got the outer, the inner, and the most holy, the most inner part, right? So this is you going deeper. You go deeper in, deeper still. You're going, you're not just hanging around the surface level, which is the third part. So, and then when you think about that, it's also a reflection of the caverns of the heart. When you got the heart, and you think about this, you got the different parts of the heart, and I'm not going to break down the anatomy. I'm just saying, like, not physically, not literal, you know what I mean? But I mean, like, there's a part of your heart, there's parts of your heart that's reserved for those that are closest to you. And then there's an area that you let people in that may not be as deep. Because there's actually 4 chambers of the heart. So I'm not even trying to say, like, oh, this all reflects, like, there's 3. Like, I'm not even talking about, like, physically, but I mean, like, there's different levels to the area of your heart that you let people into. The Bible talks about the inner parts. You know what I mean? So when you look at the inner parts, the inner man, all of that stuff, that's talking about the deepest level. So when you're going deeper in, you could picture this. So it's almost like, to me, when you think about the tabernacle, the temple, you got the outer, inner, all of that, right? This is like the heart of God. So what is your friendship level with God? Are you pursuing to go deeper with him, or are you just kind of hanging around on the outside? So and let me pace myself. So check this out. So when you think about intimacy, right? Intimacy is very difficult to do when dealing with or working through trauma. This also is difficult and can really, really be difficult for narcissists or those who struggle with fear or closeness or intimacy within their relationships. And when it comes to narcissism, like I've talked about the narcissist thing in one of my previous episodes called The Toxic Traits of Jezebel. Check that out. I've gotten a lot of good feedback on that, but I've talked about narcissism, and I'll tie that in a little bit just because, like, check this out. So when it comes to narcissists, they struggle with intimacy. If you've ever known a narcissist, you know this to be true. That's because narcissists, their agenda is to attain their supply that is needed while in public by putting on a face to get whatever it is that they want to achieve, and will keep it up as long as they don't get exhausted doing it. And keeping up a face is exhausting. So once their juice runs out, it's like they become another person. So this is why their spouses or the person that they spend the most time with that sees them on a regular, they kind of deal with it on another level. You know what I mean? Spouses, when it comes to and I'm not going to go too deep into it, but I want to tie this in because our relationship with God matters. And marriage matters because it reflects our relationship, our relationship with God. He's the groom, we're the bride. So I'm just going to kind of paint this picture, right? This is why, if you're wondering why spouses have it so hard when it comes to narcissists, because they become a point of contention. The reason they become a point of contention is because they are a point of conviction, because narcissists do feel shame. And since the ones closest to them can see that fakeness and the shame and the stuff they deal with outside of when they're just putting on a face, and they can see each side of them, they will often attack, belittle, devalue those around them, almost like a self-defense mechanism. And I say this because when it comes to intimacy, we must be vulnerable. You can't be vulnerable if you're being defensive, you know what I mean? And attacking those around you, you know what I mean? You just can't have that. And for this reason, that they get very offended and defensive and all of that stuff, they struggle with intimacy, and they often don't understand intimacy because what they want in life doesn't typically involve deep intimacy with another person. But if those walls can be broken down, I believe that anything is possible with God. So if you have someone in your life that is struggling with intimacy, have patience, grace, and mercy. Unless, of course, it gets abusive. But otherwise, keep loving them and showing them that intimacy and vulnerability is a newfound strength for them. Paul said to overcome evil with good and not be overcome with evil. And in doing so, we will heap hot coals on their heads. We will be slapping their foreheads with hot coals, man. And keep in mind, we don't fight flesh and blood. So what we're really doing is heaping hot coals on the devil. And I think about Isaiah 6, when that hot coal from the throne of God and from the altar touched Isaiah's lips and cleansed them. There's a cleansing when it comes to hot coals. So, we want to cleanse each other of the devil or any remnant of any demonic forces or characteristics. So love can really cleanse a multitude. This requires vulnerability, which requires a level of intimacy and intimate trust. You can't fight fire with fire, and you can't fight darkness with darkness. You must approach hate with love, but without losing yourself in the process. In Leviticus chapter 10, the sons of Aaron offered strange fire to the Lord. Another word for strange fire, or strange, I should say, is profane or common. It's common because the fire they offered was from earth. The fire that was supposed to be used was fire that came straight out of the Holy of Holies, the most holy place, and it would come out and devour the sacrifice. Or in other words, it was a heavenly fire rather than an earthly fire that we would just create by rubbing two sticks together. This has to do with their own works. Since they did an earthly fire and they just made it themselves, it's their own works. They created it themselves. It's their own fire. It's not fire from God. They tried to perform their own ritual rather than doing things God's way, and thus what they worked for devoured them. If we do not overflow out of the presence of God, then ministry can devour us. The cares of this life can devour us. If we're not intimate and careful on how we handle the things of God, we can get devoured. If we are not seeking intimacy with God with a heart posture that seeks after authentic holiness, then we may be operating out of pride, which leads to destruction. They were devoured by the fire of God that came out of the presence of God. Since they operated out of earthliness or a man-made or made-up version of what was supposed to be pure, they ended up becoming the sacrifice to be consumed rather than the sacrifice they had prepared. The sons of Aaron relied on their own fire that they made with their own hands to sustain them and did not go to God one bit. They relied on themselves. When we rely on our own intellect our whole lives, even in ministry, rather than the heavenly wisdom that comes out of the pure devotion to walk in the ways of the Spirit, then we can fall victim to our own pitfalls. In trying to come up with our own infrastructure apart from God, we can become architects of our own demise. When our blueprints, plans, and purposes aren't birthed out of the presence of God, then God has no obligation to complete it. He's faithful to complete the work that He's begun. But if He didn't begin the work, then it ends with us and not Him. And if He didn't begin the work in us, then He isn't obligated to begin what was never started in us. This is why we see many fake Christians and false teachers, because the inner selves, or the deep part, the deeper part of our hearts, the inner selves were never actually quickened by the Spirit in the first place. The Spirit still dwells in a holy place, but if we never dare to step into that level of intimacy with God, then where will He meet you? I pray that it is not at the end of a devouring fire. We must allow His fire to consume us with righteousness, holiness, to where our life begins in the way that Jesus explained it, which is the picture that He gave when He said to let the seed fall to the ground, because once it does and is buried like death, then it can rise again and spring forth into the earth. When a seed gets buried, the outside shell gets pushed aside by what's inside, so the inside of that seed can grow beyond the surface of the dirt. But if we try to peel away at just the outside without ever allowing God to touch the inside parts of ourselves, then what do we got? Just a funny-looking seed with no soil and no ability to grow. If we really want to grow more than ever before in this season, then we have to get over our own fears, our own dilemmas, our own strongholds, all of the things and all of the snares and all of the weight that so easily besets us from running our race. We need to let go of all of that stuff and go deeper with God. He's calling us higher. He's calling us deeper. He's calling us to really lay our faces on the ground. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is the time. We went through a season during COVID-19 and all of that stuff. Guess what was going on? People were being weeded out. There was the wheat and the tares. That's a part of what was going on. A lot of people were like, you know what, I'm finna just be online. Or some people was like, I'm just done with church. Look, in the last few years, we've seen more people use the word deconstruct than ever before. I've deconstructed too, but I deconstructed out of the world and reconstructed into the kingdom. You know what I'm saying? My whole world was deconstructed when I got saved and born again. I thank God for that. I didn't deconstruct from God. I deconstructed, and then my whole darkness fell away. I went to the marvelous light. But for real though, there was a weeding out process, man. And what's happening right now is God is calling forth people that really desire Him, that really delight in Him, that really, really want to see Him move, that really have a pure heart for Him. It's those that are pure in heart that shall see God. Those that really want to see God, what is their question? What is the question of their heart cry? It is, how must a young man keep his way pure? By keeping it according to His word. We're going to be in that word. We're going to let that word wash us clean. We're going to let His word proceed out of our mouth and no corrupt communication. We're going to let it transform us until our face shines brilliantly, like the transfigured face of Jesus on top of the mountain, because we're going to have our mountaintop experiences. And in the name of Jesus, I'm saying He's calling us higher. God is done with all of the things that's been so wrong lately, within the last few decades. God is not entertained by the things that easily impress us. You know what impresses God? Faith. We please Him. We impress Him. We make Him proud when we walk by faith and not by sight. See, a lot of us are so surface level, afraid to go deep with God because we're afraid of losing ourselves, because we're in love with ourselves rather than really being in love with God. A lot of our God, our true God, is ourselves. We place our own intellect. That's why Proverbs says, don't lean unto your own understanding, because a lot of our own idols is our own intellect. When somebody is stubborn, prideful, stuck in their ways, and just can't get over themselves, guess who is their God? Themselves. They can claim God all day, but if we put our own intellect, understanding, viewpoints, and all of that stuff, and we can't get out of our own way, let alone God's way, then who really is taking the front seat? Who is really enthroned within the depths of our heart? It's not God. We need a renovation in our hearts. Just like we need to enter into the Holy of Holies, we need to really allow Him to enter into the throne of our hearts, the deepest part of our hearts, the Holy of Holies within ourselves. And if we can't walk in the Holy of Holies where we see, look, this is the picture right here. When you walk in the cool of the day like Adam, when you walk in the cool of the day like that, when there's no barriers between us and God, you're walking in the Holy of Holies. You are, see, they was walking, when they was in the cool of the day, guess where they were? In the very deepest core center part of the garden. It wasn't out in the third farthest part from the tree. They was like in that thing, right? They were connected with heaven. They were in that meeting point with God. Meet with God. Meet with Him. And allow all of them things that don't look like Him to fall away. You know who the first witness, evangelical witness in the Bible was? I'm talking about for Jesus, right? It was the lady at the well. She went out and told everybody, you know what I mean? She gathered the whole town. But check this out. When He was talking to her, He said, there's coming a day when people will worship in spirit and truth, because she was saying, y'all say on over here and we say over here on this mountain. And then meanwhile, you got the temple. But look, He was like, yo, there's coming a time where it's not here or there. It's where they are. They're worshiping in spirit and truth, because the Holy of Holies within you. Like God, what I'm saying is, when you become born again, He makes His home in you and He abides within you. But you got to fellowship the Holy Ghost. You got to commune with God. You know what I'm saying? It's not just a profession. It's a profession of faith, but not just I'm arrogantly just saying it, but I ain't even actually allowing Him in for real. You can say it, but your life will prove whether or not you really let him make His home in you. You know what I'm saying? And I ain't saying we got it. Nobody's perfect. But what I'm saying is, no matter what level it is that you're at, because I was praying this right before this, probably an hour before I started recording this, and my prayer was, God, I need You more today than yesterday. And I'm not saying this out of self-righteous. I'm just now, in all honesty, my prayer life is finally taking another level. I went stagnant for a couple years. So I'm not saying this out of religious pride. I'm just saying that today, just a moment ago, that was my prayer. I need You more now than I did yesterday. And that should be what I say every day. So it doesn't really matter what it is you deal with, but what matters is today you trust God, because today you need God, and you need to trust God in order to get to where you're going, where He's taking you. You know what I mean? See, when the manna fell from heaven, they weren't allowed to store it up. They had to trust God for that day. We got to trust God daily. And not just trusting God, but we got to trust in His word, because it's not by bread, but every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God. And we can't even perceive the voice of the Lord that speaks to us if we've turned our ear from Him. And we wouldn't turn our ear from Him if we were in a place of intimacy with Him. I want to be like Isaiah when he said, I didn't turn my face away. I set my face like flint. He wakens me up morning by morning, and He causes my ear to hear and even my tongue to speak as a disciple. And just like Jesus when He said, I don't speak unless I hear the Father saying. I speak what I've heard the Father saying. It's kind of like, I get this picture when you're married and you're with your spouse for so long. Let's say they're not next to you. You know how they might feel or think about a situation when making a decision. So you should mind them in the process. You know what I'm saying? Because you've become one. Jesus' prayer in John 17 is that we become one, just as they were one. And you can't be one with anybody without intimacy. Trying to do so is like two rocks clashing together. Yeah, there's sparks, but not the right kind of sparks, my friend. It's friction. You know what I mean? I'm talking about unhealthy friction. And what we want to do is get the kind of friction to where we smoothen out, just like the rocks that David chose when he slayed Goliath. And one of the ways we do that, because when you think about rocks smoothing out, there's water The water streams are constantly smoothing out the rocks in that way, right? The gentle but consistent smoothing out. That's what we do with the washing of the water of the word. And then we can become weapons in the hands of the Lord to slay Goliaths, to slay giants, to slay demons. And I wanted to take it in this direction today because I've already talked about, a lot of relationships with others. I've talked about the garden. I've talked about the temple, stuff like that. But I really want to talk about our relationship with the Lord because in the end, that's what matters. Because if we don't get that right, how is our relationship with anybody else going to look right? See, the Holy Spirit will really reveal things to you, like things about yourself. When you read the Bible, you'll begin to, instead of your first thought is like, oh man, this person needs to read this. And it makes you think about what everyone else is doing wrong. You start thinking about you. Like he starts revealing things about you so you could pluck the thing out of your eye before you start judging what's wrong with your brother. And with that being said, that's a part of why sometimes I like to talk about different things like narcissism. That's a little unorthodox. I don't really hear people talk about certain mental things and, mental health and all of that stuff, but I think it's important, to be aware. And I think it's one of the good things of my generation is we are way more aware of that kind of thing. And part of the reason I like to bring it up is because when choosing a mentor and start to understand the different relationship types and those that, people that you're around, they rub off on you. So you want to basically choose the kind of boundaries that are healthy for you, depending on the relationship or the person that you're fellowshipping with to get what you need out of it, what God called you to get out of it, or what he called you to influence through it onto that next person. But, you want to watch out for certain signs, like what kind of fruit does the person bear? Do I want that? Do I want to look like that? Because we're supposed to imitate Christ. If that person don't imitate Christ, the word Christian, we're called Christians, it also means little Christ. Is that person a little Christ? Do they look like Christ? If not, then that may not be the right fit for you, because what you want to do is you want to grow up spiritually. In order to grow up spiritually, you need the right picture of what spiritual growth looks like for real. A good example, and that's Jesus. So who reflects Jesus? If somebody don't, then you might want to move on. And this is the thing. Sometimes we look at people with status, we look at people with a title, we look at people in a certain position, and it's like popularity. We have this thing about idolization, man. We do it too often, and there's these celebrities out here, and we look up to them, and we're like, man, we want them, because what do we want? We want that. We want title, status, and we want status over stature. What God is doing is he's bringing people up that want stature over status. You know what I'm saying? They don't mind being in a place of obscurity, and they don't mind finding those that are in obscurity, that don't mind being obscurity, because their obscurity really is their secret place with God. They go on the mountaintop place with God, just as Jesus retreated to the mountain. They go in that place. They spend their time with God. They spend their time alone. And guess what? They're not just alone. They're not lonely. They're not depressed. Guess what they're doing? They're slaying the dragon. They're defeating Goliath. They're slaying demons. They're really overcoming sin. They just don't need to be publicized. They don't need to be popular about it. They do it because they're growing in spiritual stamina. They're growing up spiritually, and that's what we're called to do. You know what I'm saying? That's what we're called to do. When you have people in front of you, a lot of times we flock to the person with the microphone, but look for that person that really reflects Christ. Whether they're known or not, they could be in the back or wherever they are, and people may not know them. They could just be the deacon. They could just be not nothing. But guess what? They may be the most consistent person you ever met if you just talk to them, you just open up. But that's, what I'm saying? That's for us to get rid of what's in front of our eyes, what we deem as valuable. We got to shift from what we've considered valuable in the past to what God considers valuable over the course of time. What really is timeless? It's the ways of God. It's the word of God. And when we live by the word of God, we live by the ways of God and the will of God, right? We live that out. That's what's timeless. Those are the values we want to implement into our lives. And what's relevant, that's just whatever's going on in the culture in the world today. That's just whatever we put in front of people's eyes, the highlights on social media. You know what I'm saying? A lot of times we flock to that, but God is calling up people who don't just flock to the usual. You know what I'm saying? We flock to him. Just like Mary, we sit at his feet. We want to spend time with him. You know what I'm saying? That's what matters. That's what's valuable to us. And then when it's written in the word that the hearts of sons will be drawn back to the hearts of the fathers and vice versa, you know what I'm saying? What does that mean? You know what I'm saying? First of all, God is reconciling our hearts to him, to the heart of the Father. And who has the heart of the Father? That's the person you need to seek out. And I say this obviously, you know what I'm saying, to those who are seeking mentorship. They want to be mentored. They want to take their spiritual life to the next level. You know what I mean? Like that. But at the same time, don't count yourself out. Know what it is that you're called to. Know what God's purposed you to. And I'm going to tell you right now, he's called you to holiness. And when you walk in that holiness, You've been chosen to live a life for him. You've been chosen to reflect him. You've been chosen to walk out the plans and purposes of God and let your life preach even louder than your words ever could. You know what I mean? You'll live a life that's a testament to those around you within your sphere of influence. You know what I'm saying? And then people will start to seek you out. But guess what? It won't be for popularity. Whenever we're immature spiritually, we look for things that don't really entertain God and it don't really entertain angels because we need authenticity. My generation is looking for authenticity. As many issues as we have in my generation, we're looking for authenticity. That's what we need. That's what we desire. And we need the authentic presence of God. You know what I'm saying? So keep your eyes open and keep your senses open and keep your heart responsive to the voice of God. Don't turn back away from it when he speaks to you, when he highlights someone to you. And for those of you who don't think you're ready, when God highlights someone to you that you're supposed to speak life to, go ahead and speak life to them. Don't count yourself out, even if you've never really been mentored like that. That's something I struggle with, you know what I mean? Shoot, I don't know if you call that like an imposter syndrome or whatever. But, and I say that, you know what I'm saying, like with a whole nother thing in mind. Another scripture I had was John 10:10, where the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy. We've often heard that preached in a way that relates to the devil, which it should be, because that is what it is. But think about who he was talking to also. It's talking about false shepherds. He said, I am the good shepherd in the line after that. So he's talking about false shepherds. And why there's so many false shepherds out there is because what did the false shepherds do of that day? They wanted to pray loud and repetitive prayers in front of people to seem more spiritual than they really were. They wanted to be seen giving their alms. They wanted to be seen, you know what I'm saying, doing the things that looked spiritual to make them look good. But they weren't really seen by heaven. You know what I mean? And then there's gifted people. There's people that where the gifts and calling of God are irrevocable, right? And they may walk in the gifts, and some things may be natural for them, but the gifts can only take you so far, because you can walk in gifts and your gifts can get you to certain doors. But if you only walk in gifts, then you may forget about the heart of the Father. And in the end, the heart of the Father is what matters. You know what I'm saying? Especially when it has to do with mentorship. Because what you want to do is you want to develop a consistency with getting to know the nature of God and the heart of God so that you can reflect that to others. So I hope I wasn't just rambling through this, man. I don't want to, you know me, I don't want to take too long. I don't want to make this too exhaustive, but I kind of want to flow. I want to use some notes, but at the same time, I don't want to just be using notes. I want to really give what my heart is giving. So I hope that was value. I hope you find value in everything I just said. Man, God is doing something to where I feel like he's renewing leaders, like true leaders, you know, true ministries that are really founded on the rock, the cornerstone, the truth, and really founded and built around, like the Israelites when they encamped around the presence of God. That's what we need to do, is really encamp ourselves around the presence of God and really follow the presence of the Lord. Really follow him and not quench the spirit. And as we do that, we'll have those around us that are called to us and those that we're called to. And eventually, church is going to take on an authentic form, and not without trials and tribulations, not without suffering. But there is an endurance that is coming upon those that are truly sent from God. And we're entering into a really interesting time. As things in the world get darker, the light will shine brighter in the midst of that. So be a light to somebody, whether you're a direct mentor or you're just, you know, making sure your influence is intentional in everyone around you daily, or whatever that looks like. But in all of that, make sure that it all comes out of overflow from the presence of God and the spirit of holiness. You know, before I forget, I was thinking about this, right? 1 Timothy, it says that a leader must manage his household well. And I was thinking about the idea of that, you know, like a leader, the accountability is way higher for a leader. He has to be able to manage his household well. And I was thinking about that, and I'm thinking, the way I think about it is, you know, your household, your family. Because when you think about what a family is the immediates. That's your immediate relatives, and you do life together. You live together. You eat together. All of those things. That's what mentorship is too. Mentorship isn't doing events with another person. It's doing life with another person. So if you don't do life with your holy holies, your family, if you don't do that well with them, then how can you be expected to do life well with those in the inner or outer courts outside of that immediate realm, which is your holy, the deepest part, which is the center, which is the core, which is your family? Because God is all about family. He's the one that designed family to be the way it is. You know what I'm saying? When he saw Adam, he said it's not good for him to be alone. He made Eve, and now you got family. And he cares about family dynamics and relationships more than we do. So if a man is unable to lead his family well, which is his holy of holies, his immediate, his core, then how can he be expected to live by the standards set by Jesus, the example set by Jesus in leading the bride, his church, the body, the family of God? Anyways, that's all I got for you guys today. I hope you guys really enjoyed this series on mentorship types / relationship types. Let me know if you want to hear more along the lines of relationships, mentorships, just, whatever. Let me know. Give me some feedback. I love y'all. Peace.